maybe that not y'all know, but the one besides Keish that I always talk about, and every time I see him, I tell him thank you, because it wasn't like we was enemies, or we didn't hang out together. Was 50 Cent, Mr. Curtis Jackson.
Wow.
Whenever I put in for an appellate judgment or an appeal, he made sure that letters was written. He personally signed them, telling, the judge, if you do grant her this release.
What happened during that live stream was not something people could easily shake off. It didn't feel like entertainment, and it didn't feel staged. It felt uncomfortable in a way that made viewers sit still instead of scrolling. This was not the usual celebrity moment designed to grab attention or create quick headlines. It felt personal, heavy, and deeply emotional. From the moment Papoose appeared on screen, the energy felt different. There was no upbeat music, no jokes, and no attempt to hype people up. He didn't greet the audience with excitement or confidence. He looked worn down. His face showed exhaustion, not the kind that comes from working late or missing sleep, but the kind that builds up after carrying emotional weight for too long. It was clear almost immediately that this was not a planned performance. This was not someone chasing views. This looked like a man who had reached the end of his ability to stay quiet. The silence he had been holding on to seemed heavier than the consequences of finally speaking. As more people joined the live, the comment section moved quickly. Names appeared. Familiar industry figures entered quietly. Viewers noticed Remy Ma watching. Fat Joe was there as well. Others came and went without saying a word. It felt like people gathering in a room before difficult news is shared. No one knew exactly what was coming, but everyone sensed that something serious was about to be said. When Papoose finally began talking, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't rant or lash out. He spoke slowly and clearly, choosing his words carefully. There was a calmness in his tone, but it wasn't peaceful. It sounded like the calm that comes after someone has already cried in private and has no energy left to pretend anymore. There was something hollow underneath his words, almost like he already understood that once he said what he was about to say, there would be no undoing it. That awareness made every sentence feel heavier. This didn't come across as gossip spilling out. It felt like a truth that had been sitting inside him for a long time, growing more uncomfortable with each passing day. He spoke as someone who had gone back and forth with himself, questioning his own thoughts, trying to convince himself that what he was seeing wasn't real. He talked about moments that didn't add up, late nights that came with weak explanations, patterns that kept repeating even when he tried to ignore them, situations that raised questions he didn't want to ask because asking them would mean opening doors he wasn't ready to walk through. Anyone who has ever loved deeply could recognize that struggle. When you care about someone, you often choose peace over confrontation. You tell yourself that you're overthinking. You accept explanations that don't fully satisfy you because the alternative feels worse. Facing the truth sometimes means risking everything you've built. As he continued, the comments slowed down. People weren't typing as much. They were listening. Then he mentioned a name that instantly changed the energy in the room. 50 Cent. The moment that name left his mouth, everything shifted. Screen recordings started. Phones were raised. People leaned closer to their screens. This wasn't casual. This wasn't random. Saying that name gave the situation a different weight, and everyone watching understood that immediately. What made it even more intense was how he talked about it. He didn't throw accusations wildly. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't make exaggerated claims. He didn't show screenshots or play recordings. Instead, he described moments. He spoke about conversations that crossed boundaries, about a closeness that didn't fit the public story everyone had been given, about situations that felt wrong even if they couldn't be proven in one clear moment. He spoke like someone who had already connected the dots privately and no longer needed to argue with himself about what they meant. With every sentence, the live felt quieter. He explained that this wasn't about one mistake or a single bad decision. According to him, this was something that had been happening repeatedly, a pattern that continued quietly while he stayed loyal, stayed supportive, and continued protecting the image of his marriage. That was the part that made it difficult to watch. This wasn't anger driving him forward. It was disappointment and grief. He sounded like someone mourning something that had already ended emotionally, even if it hadn't officially ended yet. Then the tone shifted again, this time into something darker. He said the situation didn't stay between adults. He said it reached his family. The moment he said that, the mood of the live changed completely. This stopped being celebrity drama. This became serious. His voice cracked slightly. His breathing changed. The steady control he had been holding on to started slipping. Not in a dramatic or explosive way, but in a painfully human way. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because they realize they are witnessing someone breaking down in real time. The comment section didn't know how to react. Some people begged him to stop. Others begged him to keep going. Some asked him to protect his peace. Others asked him to tell the full truth. Everyone felt the weight of the moment, even if they didn't know what to say. This was not a performance. This was a man realizing that his silence hadn't protected anyone. It had only allowed the situation to grow worse. When the live ended, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like the opening of something irreversible. Something that could not be put back once it had been said. Almost immediately, clips from the live started spreading. Short segments were posted everywhere. People replayed certain sentences. They analyzed his pauses. They listened closely to what he said and what he avoided saying. Nothing felt accidental. What stood out most was not the proof he showed, but the proof he chose not to show. He mentioned messages. He hinted at voice notes. He referred to conversations that existed off-screen, but he didn't play any of them. That decision changed how people viewed the entire situation. In a culture where exposing receipts is almost expected, his restraint made the moment feel heavier. It suggested that what he had was real, deeply personal, and possibly damaging enough that releasing it fully would hurt more people than it helped. Instead of convincing the audience with evidence, he allowed implication to do the work. An implication can be more powerful than direct proof, because it forces people to connect the dots on their own. As the night went on, viewers turned into investigators. Old interviews resurfaced. Old photos were re-examined. Moments that once seemed harmless were now questioned under a new lens. People weren't just watching anymore. They were analyzing timelines. The conversation shifted quickly. It was no longer about whether something happened. It became about how long it had been happening. That shift changed everything. When Papoose spoke again later, he sounded different. Slower. Softer. Less guarded. He didn't sound like someone trying to win an argument or control a narrative. He sounded like someone trying to understand how his life had quietly become something he didn't recognize anymore. He talked about trust. About choosing to believe a version of reality because questioning it would have destroyed everything he was trying to protect. He admitted that there were moments when he noticed warning signs, but he pushed them aside because he wasn't ready to face what they might mean. That honesty resonated with a lot of people. Because most betrayals don't arrive loudly. They don't show up all at once. They arrive slowly. They hide behind excuses, scheduling conflicts, and reassurances that everything is fine. By the time the truth becomes impossible to ignore, the damage has already taken place. Then he said something that made many viewers physically uncomfortable. He said the doubt didn't stay between adults. He said it affected his family. He didn't go into details. He didn't need to. The implication alone was enough to silence the chat. This was no longer about embarrassment or public opinion. This was about emotional safety and trust within a household. His voice broke again, not out of rage but heartbreak. He spoke about loving someone fully and realizing that the love may not have been returned in the same way. About standing in a marriage that looked strong from the outside while quietly questioning its foundation behind closed doors. At that point, people weren't watching out of curiosity. They were watching because it felt wrong to turn away. As the clips continued to circulate, the internet split into two main sides. One side believed this was a truth that had been buried for too long. They saw a man who had been patient, loyal, and silent until staying quiet became unbearable. They believed his words were the result of years of emotional pressure finally reaching a breaking point. The other side saw someone unraveling. They believed he was emotionally exhausted and overwhelmed, and they worried about the long-term impact of sharing something so personal so publicly. But both sides agreed on one thing: the pain was real. What intensified everything was the lack of an immediate response from the people involved. There were no quick denials, no statements, no explanations, just silence. And silence in moments like this speaks loudly. People interpreted that silence in different ways. Some saw it as guilt. Others saw it as a strategic decision. Regardless of the reason, the absence of a response allowed speculation to grow without limits. By the next morning, the tone around the story had shifted. Shock turned into analysis. Analysis turned into timeline building. Online discussions debated whether this was a calculated exposure or an emotional breaking point reached after years of restraint. One interpretation continued to gain traction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about exhaustion. Exhaustion from holding unanswered questions. Exhaustion from protecting an image that no longer felt honest. Exhaustion from believing silence could fix something that was already broken. As time passed, it became clear this wasn't a moment that would fade quickly. This wasn't a viral clip that would disappear after a few news cycles. It was a fracture, and fractures don't heal simply because people stop talking about them. Careers would move forward. Music would still be released. Public appearances would continue. But something had changed permanently. Once a truth like that is spoken out loud, it can't be taken back. Once doubt enters a space that was built on trust, nothing ever feels the same again. This wasn't the final word, but it was the beginning of a very public reckoning. And whatever comes next, the silence that once held everything together is gone for good.